Hello and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. I'm Dr. Greer and I'm the founder of SiriusDisclosure.com. It's SIRIUS, like SiriusXM, but SiriusDisclosure.com, and the Disclosure Project and CSETI. We are very grateful that the folks at the World Puja Network lets us have this time every 2 weeks to bring you up to date on what's happening with our projects and on the whole front of disclosure and contact with ETs around the world, and also what we're doing with this historic and groundbreaking film, Sirius, which is now available for viewing. We actually missed one of the shows because I've been on a 3.5-week trip where we were pretty much going 18 to 20 hours a day with the big premiere out in Los Angeles and the Washington, D.C. premiere and the citizen hearings as at the National Press Club, and then of course we had the big Virginia premiere here in Charlottesville, Virginia, and then a 3-day expedition out under the stars, which just completed on the wee hours of Monday morning. So we've really been busy, but I missed being on this show, and I'm really excited about this particular one because we have one of the most renowned, and I think one of the most solid researchers on the UFO subject in the world, who has been working in this area for over 30 years, since the days of J. Allen Hynek, who of course was with the Project Air Force Blue Book, and later went on his own to establish the Center for UFO Studies. And she's also been someone who has been so key to helping us identify important military and pilot witnesses and evidence that's in Europe, and has done studies of the UFO subject all over the world. And I'm speaking of Paola Harris. So, Paola, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
It's my pleasure, Steve. It's always my pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
You're welcome. Well, you know, we were just just saw each other in Washington, D.C., which was another historic event. You know, we've just had the 12-year anniversary of the worldwide launch of the Disclosure Project, which was on May 9th, 2001. And of course, being back at the National Press Club was very interesting, and just like to get your take on how that went.
Well, you know, it was riveting. I did not move out of my chair, not even to go to the restroom, Steve, because I think what happened there was that the 6 people that were chosen, the 3 men and 3 women, and they were equally balanced, had no idea what they were up against when the solid evidence came before them from all over the world, pilots, people from South America, you know, your briefing and so forth. I have a feeling they thought they were going to deal with sightings. And here they come with this solid evidence. I saw jaws drop. I saw their reactions were so they were so shocked. But what was amazing, and I will say this, we could talk about it a little bit, is a couple of them felt they really needed to step up to the plate because this was solid evidence, this was planetary changing, and I was happy to see that it was that serious. It wasn't a conference, it was a hearing.
Well, and they that Paula is talking about are the former members of Congress who were there. We had former Senator Gravel of Alaska who was there. We had Congressman Cook. We had Congresswoman Kirkpatrick and Congresswoman Woolsey, and also Congressman Barrett. And it was just an amazing group of folks who really did not know a thing about the UFO and disclosure matter that were there and heard this information from all over the world. Of course, I was testifying on both the first and the last day of the event, and on the last day went into the data on the technological information about how these UFOs work and what's being withheld from the public and what the implications of those sciences are. And I think that my take on it was that not only did they understand the implications of this, but became quite convinced that this was a matter of enormous importance, and several of them made comments to the effect that they were going to get involved in trying to see that this information was brought forward and perhaps even help educate their colleagues who are currently still in the Congress.
Yeah, Steve, what you said when you testified, you said you were an emergency doctor, and this was an emergency. And it was really, really, it came across, it was very poignant. It came across because it wasn't something, where they were attending because of entertainment. It was something because that it had such incredible implications for humanity. It changed their worldview. I saw it right in front of me. And the people that were asked to testify were solid people. A lot of them were military witnesses, some very emotional. One particular man, Colonel French, that had been asked to shoot down UFOs, he said he didn't even tell his wife. I mean, these people have been carrying the burden of truth for such a long time. And watching it, and it was incredible to watch the looks on both the Congress people and the witnesses, watching the interaction. For once, I had some hope that something would be done.
Well, and what's fascinating to me is the degree to which, for most people, they think this is sort of a sideshow issue until they realize what we collected with the Disclosure Project. And by the way, if you go to SiriusDisclosure.com, it's SIRIUS, like SiriusXM, SiriusDisclosure.com, you'll see that under UFO evidence, we're loading up a huge number of the entire testimonies of many of these top-secret military and pilot and other witnesses. And I remember when we first started gathering them before the National Press Club event 12 years ago, that many of these men wept on my shoulder privately and said that they had carried the secret of this for their entire lives, and that often their wives, no one in the whole world knew, and they didn't even know who to tell anyway, and that it was pulling a lot of them together and all coming forward at once that launched eventually, of course, the worldwide disclosure movement, and is continuing to result in these sorts of people coming forward. And I consider these men and women very heroic and courageous to have done so. And I put out a call for more of them to do so around the world who have this information, because not only is it the secrecy being handled illegally, and this is what, of course, one of the moderators was the renowned constitutional attorney Danny Sheehan, who was our advisor for the Disclosure Project. And he and I had reached the conclusion back in the late 1990s and early 2000s that the management of the secrecy was, in fact, a criminal enterprise, because one of the perspectives I tried to bring to these hearings was the fact that I was the only person in the room who had personally briefed people like the CIA director and the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency and many sitting members of Congress on the intelligence committees and oversight committees of the Congress, as well as senior officials at NASA and the National Science Foundation, et cetera, and so on. And what I had found in each and every one of these meetings I had is that the unacknowledged special access projects, which is the proper term for these so-called black and illegal enterprises that are keeping all of this information and technology secret, were lying to people who are in very high positions. I mean, I remember when I briefed the CIA director for President Clinton that he was virtually in tears and was saying at the end of the meeting, when I asked him to help with bringing this information out, he said, well, how do the president and I bring out something that we have no access to? And it was one of the most chilling, stunning moments of my young adult life. I mean, imagine being, a guy in his mid-30s who's working full-time in emergency medicine, briefing a sitting CIA director and having someone of that level in our government say that to you. But that was only the first of dozens of senior people like that. And, of course, the Honorable Paul Hellyer, who had been Minister of Defense for Canada, testified also at these hearings at the National Press Club. And he had told me privately that the entire time that he was the Minister of Defense of Canada, which, of course, is a G7, group of 7 major country, he had never been told anything about this subject. And it wasn't until years later when he read Colonel Corso's book, The Day After Roswell, and he ended up talking to an Air Force general who confirmed to him that that information was substantially correct and more, that he began to really look into this. And then, of course, he and I met quite a few times and we held a press conference, actually, up in Toronto. But here you had a Minister of Defense telling me that. And I always point out that someone who is in our film Sirius, which you can now look at, it's online on video on demand at SiriusDisclosure.com for anyone who wants to see it, or you could also pre-order the DVD. We had a long meeting with the Minister of Defense of Great Britain, Lord Hill Norton, and just so people get a sense of who that man was, I mean, this was a man who was a 5-star admiral, what they used to call a Sea Lord. And in the House of Lords, he was head of the Ministry of Defense. He was head of the Military Committee for NATO. He was, as head of the Ministry of Defense, they're also sort of the head of our CIA, which would be MI5 and MI6 in Great Britain. And I'll never forget sitting in his, what he called his cottage, which was one of these grand old manor houses in Hampshire. And I'm sitting in his living room, and he's saying, would you please give me the briefing you're putting together for the President and for the UN Secretary General and people like that? And I said, certainly I will. And he says, you know, the entire time that I was in these very high positions, none of this was known to me. It wasn't until years later that he found out about the subject and started making inquiries. And he was really scared and also angry that as a Minister of Defense of Great Britain and being the head of the Military Committee for NATO all those years, that he had been completely zoomed, denied access, completely, left out of the loop. And he was just shaken. And he says, who else has this happened to? And I said, well, the current president, the CIA director, the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He looked at me. He says, in America? I said, yes. I said, the folks who are running these programs have completely done what Eisenhower warned us about when he said, beware the military-industrial complex, because it will become a threat to our way of life and our democracy. I said, that has fully come to pass. And I said, this really is a threat to our way of life, because it's not just withholding the information, which is interesting. They're withholding all these sciences and technologies which would get us off of oil. And, of course, that's the punchline that at the last day of the hearing, that was, Paula, my main focus was the reason for the secrecy isn't because people think they can't handle that there's intelligent life in the universe. It's because by October of 1954, these clandestine research projects that were going on since the 40s had figured out gravity control and how to build these anti-gravity devices, which people call UFOs, but they're not unidentified to the people who fly them, and that these technologies, if we could disclose them, would give us a source of energy and eventually transportation that would make all the oil and gas and coal and nuclear power and public utilities and pollution a thing of faint memory of the past. And that should have happened half a century ago, and it hasn't. And so it isn't just a matter of some curiosity about ETs out there. It really is why I tell people our planet is in a global geophysical and geopolitical emergency, and the remedy is sitting in a black box that we have to all come together and figure out how to bring out. And I think that was the message that I know when talking to Senator Gravel and some of the other Congress people, that they were really taken with that, because they saw that was actionable intelligence. That was information that would make a difference to the average person, whereas whether or not there's life out there in the universe may or may not be of interest to, the good old boy down the road who, with his pickup truck. But if he's driving an F-150 pickup truck, he's got to spend almost $100 to fill it up with gasoline. But if he had an electric motor that was pulling energy out of the 0-point energy field, he would have zero cost for running his truck. So the average person begins to realize, oh, it's about macroeconomic power. And that is also something that the Honorable Paul